Con el lema de un nuevo liderazgo, el alcalde de South Bend, Indiana, aspira a la candidatura presidencial del Partido Demócrata. Démosle la bienvenida. Please welcome South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg. Alcalde, buenas tardes.
Buenas tardes.
¿Usted habla español bien?
Más o menos.
¿Dónde lo aprendió?
¿Cómo?
¿Dónde lo aprendió?
En colegio.
En la preparatoria, el high school.
Sí, sí, y a veces por televisión.
Y habla 6 idiomas más.
Sí, pero no es tan perfecto.
I won't ask you about
de vez en cuando.
Okay. So,
gracias.
Señor alcalde, we are 79 days away from the Iowa primaries, and it seems that we will be adding at least 2 new candidates to the race. Former New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg, former Massachusetts Governor Deval Patrick. Some seem to doubt whether the current group of candidates is strong enough to beat President Trump. Is it?
First of all, I think every one of the candidates competing on the Democratic side would make a monumentally better president than the one we have right now. Now, I think also each of us is competing to show that we would be the best president and that we would be the best competitor to President Trump. And I believe, as somebody who works and governs in the heart of the industrial Midwest, as somebody who wore the uniform and can speak to what is at stake in these decisions, as somebody who is rooted in executive leadership in a community, not in the ways of Washington, I think that, of course, I am the best person to go into that competition. But the job is for each of us to go out there and prove it.
So the field doesn't need any more candidates?
Well, you know, it's not for me to advise anybody else on what to do in the race. What I'll say is that we're running our race, and so far it's going well, but we got some more hills to climb.
Let me ask you about Senator Warren. She announced yesterday that if elected, she would not push for Medicare for all until the 3rd year of her presidency. This is a change. Is she now moving closer to your position on healthcare?
Not my place to characterize somebody else's plan. What I'll say is this: I still have the same concern, which is the idea, whether it's at 3 years or 4 years like it was before, or at a certain time that we're supposed to guess in Washington, that we just command that everybody leave their private plans. I would rather allow Americans to make the decision for themselves. So the idea of our plan, Medicare for all who want it, is we make it available for everybody, but we trust you to decide whether and when you want it. And my thinking is, if this is the best plan for everybody, then everybody will choose it, and it will become the single payer. If, on the other hand, there remain some Americans, I'm thinking, for example, about a lot of union members who negotiated good private plans, who would prefer to keep their plan, I'm not going to command them to abandon that plan.
Yesterday as well, President Obama spoke about the Democratic primaries in depth, perhaps for the first time. Among other things, he said, and I quote, "This is a country that is less revolutionary than it is interested in improvement." That seems to be an endorsement of centrist politics. Do you agree with him?
I view it this way. Here's what I agree with, is the idea that the role of activists is to move the country as far forward as possible and to tug the politicians forward. That's different from the role of those seeking office and holding office, who have to balance the concerns of different constituencies. But I also believe that being bold and having big ideas should not be measured by how many people you alienate. Because the things I'm proposing, for example, it's true that they're not as extreme as some of the others, but they would still make me the most progressive president of my lifetime.
So the activist wing of the party should be more pragmatic at this point?
Well, I think that's what primaries are there to decide. And I think the most important thing is to put forward the policies that we believe make the most sense. But also, I think this is very important. Right now, there is an American majority ready to back us up, not only on issues like minimum wage and family leave, where people have trusted Democrats for a long time, but in the areas where Democrats have been on defense in the past: guns, immigration, health care. We should do everything we can to hold that majority together, galvanize, not polarize it. And if we can do that, and I'm talking not just about how to win elections, but how to govern, if we can hold that majority together, in a unifying way for a divided country, we have the opportunity to deliver the boldest, biggest changes that we have seen in longer than I have been alive.
Let me ask you this. As a veteran, you criticized President Trump's decision to pull back American troops from Syria. You said it was a betrayal of our allies. But you have also called for an end to America's endless wars. Yes. When would you commit troops, American troops, to conflicts abroad? What would be the Buttigieg foreign policy doctrine?
Yeah. So it would be based on the need to save American lives, the knowledge that there is no reasonable alternative, and the network of alliances that help save American lives and preserve American interests. All of those things have to go together. And the real tragedy of the betrayal in Syria is that what you had there was preventing endless war. In other words, you had a handful of highly specialized special operations troops and intelligence professionals. And that small number of people was all it took to keep things stable there. You take that out, and actually the path to endless war becomes much more dangerous.
On foreign policy, quickly, as Ilya said, 9 American citizens, including 6 children, were recently killed in Mexico by local cartels. Should certain Mexican drug cartels be officially designated foreign terrorist organizations?
I believe that should be on the table because they are spreading terror. I also believe that U.S.-Mexican security cooperation needs to be enhanced in order to make sure that people thrive in Mexico and on both sides of the border. But also, we know that if we reform drug policy here in the U.S., we can actually reduce the financial rewards that fuel these cartels to begin with. And we need to think about our responsibility to move past the failed war on drugs.
Mayor, we have a question for you from the audience. Jorge Ramos will help us with that. Jorge.
Gracias, Leon. Joana López. Go ahead.
Good evening. So my mother has a permanent medical condition. And so my question to you is, how can you help people such as my mom who she's too sick to work. So how can you help people like her? And how can you help people such as myself who need to cover those medical costs?
Yeah. So this is why it is so important to deliver universal health coverage in this country. And the approach that I favor, Medicare for all who want it, would mean that both of you would be able to get a plan that is also something that you can afford no matter what, because we have subsidies if income is a barrier, and that ensures that you can get good coverage. Now, that's not all there is to it. If, for example, you find that you are performing caregiving duties, I believe that as a caregiver, even though that kind of work doesn't get credit in our economy today, that deserves getting credit towards Social Security because it is work, and we should honor the work that you're doing.
Joana, muchas gracias. Thank you.
Finally, Mayor, over the last 10 years, around 150 shootings have been committed by children, teenagers, minors, 17 and younger. How do we keep guns outside the access of children, at least children?
Of course. And this is something that has affected my community. The darkest moments, I think, for most mayors are the moments when you find yourself consoling parents of children who have been killed or teenagers who have been killed in violence. And often it is also teenagers perpetrating gun violence. It is why the time has come to insist that it is a matter of national security that we stop allowing the Second Amendment to be distorted into an excuse to do nothing whatsoever when it comes to common sense gun policy. Now, that means universal background checks to make sure that people, it is harder to get these weapons in the first place. It means red flag laws, identifying when there are cases where family members know that somebody could be a risk. It means banning the sale of assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. The things I trained on in the military have no business being sold for profit in American communities. Right? They're weapons of war. But let's also ask the question behind this question. Because 90% of Americans, including most gun owners, including most Republicans, believe we should at least be doing the background checks and the red flag laws. And still, something that commands such a big majority in the American people cannot get a majority in the American Congress. This is what tells us that our democracy is broken and that gerrymandering, money in politics, and the other distorting forces that make our democracy less democratic need to be confronted and need to be reformed to deal with this and every issue.
What should be done with assault weapons, specifically?
Yeah. Well, we should ban the sale of assault weapons and high-capacity magazines, because banning high-capacity magazines means that there's less ammunition available for the weapons that are there. And again, this is based on the simple. Think of it this way, because I know there are some people who believe that the Second Amendment means you cannot restrict any access to any weapon. But we have already decided as a country that you cannot have access to a nuclear weapon. Everybody can have a water balloon. Nobody can have a nuclear weapon. Anyone can have a slingshot. Nobody can have a Predator drone. So this is not some new constitutional idea we're asserting. It's just that we've got to decide where to draw the line, and we need to draw the line tighter than we have so far.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure to meet you. Thank you for joining us. Muchas gracias a usted.